The galaxy had known many wars, but none like the one that began with the humans. The other species had always seen Earth as a cursed world, a planet of storms and predators, a place no sane empire would dare to conquer. Yet when war broke out, among the great powers, humanity was dragged into it not by choice but by survival. Ships burned in the void, alliances cracked apart, and rumors spread across star systems of humans doing the impossible. In the middle of this chaos, there were whispers of a single man who had changed the course of battles with nothing more than courage and wit. He was young, carrying scars on his face, his uniform always torn from the front lines. Soldiers who had fought beside him said his presence alone turned fear into fire. His name was spoken with both respect and fear, for humans had earned a title few wanted to believe, Deathworlders. But the war did not only bring enemies, it brought attention, unwanted and dangerous, from two of the most powerful alien warriors in the galaxy. One came from the fire tribes of Erithus, her people, known for their blazing strength and merciless pride. She had hair like flames and eyes that glowed like embers, and her voice alone could silence a room. The other came from the frost clans of Corinia, a place where life clung to frozen peaks. She was as beautiful as she was lethal, with hair like flowing ice and a gaze as sharp as crystal. Both were feared on the battlefield, both undefeated in combat, and both sworn to their empires. Yet when they crossed paths with the human soldier, something shifted. At first they had seen him only as a curiosity, a fragile being from a cursed planet. But then they witnessed what he could do. They watched him stand where no one else would, take wounds that should have ended him and rise again with laughter instead of pain. They saw him fight not for empire or glory, but for the lives around him. The fire warrior, with her fierce heart, was the first to feel the strange pull. She had grown up believing weakness was to be despised, yet here was a man who turned his weakness into strength. She watched him throw himself in front of enemies twice his size, and her heart burned with something she had never felt before. The frost warrior, cold and disciplined, told herself emotions were distractions. But she too could not ignore the way the human spoke to her, not as a rival or monster, but as if she were more than her armor. His words cut through the ice around her soul in ways no weapon ever had. What began as respect grew into something neither of them understood. In the fire warrior, it ignited a storm of passion, fierce and unstoppable. In the frost warrior, it melted walls that had stood for centuries. Both found themselves drawn to the same man, though neither would admit it. The human himself did not see what was unfolding. To him, they were comrades in war, allies who had saved his life more times than he could count. He respected them both, trusted them both, never realizing the fire that was building in their hearts. But others began to notice. Soldiers whispered when the fire warrior stood too close to him, when the frost warrior lingered by his side. Tension grew not only on the battlefield but in the silence between missions. Then came the night when everything shifted. The war had taken them to the ruins of a once great city, its towers shattered and streets littered with ash. The human stood at the center, his eyes heavy with the weight of survival. On one side, the fire warrior approached, her steps loud, her presence like heat against the skin. On the other side, the frost warrior appeared, her movements silent, the air around her cool and sharp. They met in the ruined hall, and for the first time, the two warriors faced each other not as allies, but as rivals. The air between them grew tense, charged with something more dangerous than the war outside. And though the human did not yet understand it, the galaxy itself would soon feel the storm of what was beginning. The Deathworlders' love triangle. The ruined city seemed almost alive that night. The wind howled through broken towers, carrying the smell of dust and old fire. The human soldier stood in the middle of it all, shoulders heavy with exhaustion, unaware of the silent war building between the two alien warriors at his side. He thought they were there to protect him, but their eyes told a different story. The fire warrior watched the frost warrior with open challenge. Her burning eyes glared, her stance proud, as if daring the other to step closer. She had always believed strength must be claimed, and she was ready to fight for what she wanted. The frost warrior did not flinch. Her calm face betrayed nothing, but inside she felt a storm she did not want to admit. She had trained her whole life to control her emotions, to hide every weakness, but around the human, her discipline trembled. The man sensed something was wrong. He turned his head, confused by the silence that stretched between them. "We've survived too much to start fighting each other," he said softly, his voice tired yet steady. He tried to smile as if to break the tension, but neither warrior smiled back. Their gazes locked over him like blades drawn in a duel. They were not enemies, not yet, but they stood as if one spark would set the city ablaze. Memories rushed through, them both pulling them deeper into their own conflict. The fire warrior remembered the night she had first seen him bleed. He had been struck down, his body broken, yet instead of crying out, he had laughed, a wild, fearless sound that shook her heart. That laugh haunted her ever since. It was reckless, maddening, and yet it filled her with respect no one else had ever earned. She could not forget it, and she could not let anyone else claim it. The Frost Warrior remembered something different. She remembered the moment he had spoken to her not as a commander, not as a soldier, but simply as a person. He had looked at her with kindness, something rare in her icy world, and had said words no one had dared before. "You don't have to be alone in this." The memory of those words warmed her in a way she never thought possible. She had built her life on cold walls, but he had stepped inside them without force. That warmth was hers, and she would not let it slip away. The human still thought of them as comrades. He never guessed at the battle happening inside their hearts. He only saw two warriors who had risked everything for him, two allies who had become his closest friends in a galaxy where trust was rare. To him, their silent standoff was just stress from war, nothing more. But the truth was clear to everyone else. Soldiers in their unit had whispered for weeks about the way the fire warrior's eyes followed him, about the way the frost warrior stood closer than necessary. Whispers spread like smoke, and soon even enemies noticed the tension. The human had become more than a soldier. He had become the center of something no one dared name aloud. That night in the ruins, the silence finally broke. The fire warrior stepped forward first, her voice low and sharp. "He belongs with me," she said, not to the human but to her rival. The frost warrior's expression did not change, but her words cut like ice. "He does not belong to you, or anyone." The human blinked, stunned by the sudden words. For a moment he thought he had misheard them, but the weight in their voices was real. The war outside seemed distant compared to the one standing in front of him now. Neither warrior raised their weapon, but the fire in their eyes was enough to freeze him in place. For the first time, he realized the truth. This was not just about war, not just about survival. Something far deeper had begun to grow, and he was caught in the middle of it. The ruined city stood silent as if watching, its broken walls echoing the beginning of a conflict no battlefield had prepared him for. The war did not pause for their feelings. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and the ruined city soon echoed with the sound of engines and weapons. The human and the two alien warriors were forced back into battle, fighting side by side once more. But though their blades and guns moved in unison, their hearts clashed with every glance. The fire warrior fought with fury. Every strike of her weapon carried the heat of her emotions. She wanted the human to see her strength, to know she would burn down entire armies for his sake. The frost warrior fought with deadly calm, her movements sharp and precise. Yet even in her cold control, her eyes drifted to him. She wanted him to see her steadiness, to know she would never leave his side, no matter how hopeless the fight became. The human did not notice these silent wars. He was too focused on keeping them alive, too busy pushing through enemy lines. The enemy came in waves, armored troops with orders to erase everything in their path. Explosions rattled the ground and smoke filled the sky, but still the three of them pressed forward. It was during one of these battles that the cracks in their alliance began to show. A squad of enemies surrounded them in the narrow streets of the ruined city. The human was pinned down, and for a moment it looked like there was no escape. The fire warrior rushed ahead without waiting, her blazing strikes scattering the enemy, but she left her flank open. The frost warrior shouted, a warning, but it was too late. A shot grazed her side, searing through armor. She staggered, rage flashing in her eyes, and for an instant she blamed the frost warrior for not covering her. The frost warrior moved quickly to shield the human, her blade flashing in the dim light. Her strikes were cold and perfect, but her thoughts burned with anger. She had seen the fire warrior's recklessness, and she hated how it endangered him. She told herself the human needed someone steady, not someone who let emotions rule their hand. When the last enemy fell, silence returned. But the tension between them was louder than the battle had been. The fire warrior's wound was shallow, but her pride was cut deep. She stood tall, her voice filled with heat. "I don't need your warnings," she said sharply to the frost warrior. "I fight my way. I win my way." The frost warrior's tone was calm, but her words were ice. "Your way almost killed him. If you care about him, control yourself." The human stepped between them, his hands raised, confusion plain on his face. "Enough," he said. His voice was tired but firm. "We're in this war together. You've saved me more times than I can count. Don't let pride ruin that." His words silenced them, but only on the surface. Inside, the fire warrior's heart roared louder. She hated being told to hold back. Hated the frost warrior's calm eyes that seemed to judge her. At the same time, the frost warrior clenched her fists behind her back, fighting the urge to speak again. She hated how the fire warrior's passion drew his attention, even if it was reckless. That night, when they rested in the broken remains of a collapsed tower, the human sat quietly, cleaning his weapon. He thought about their words, about the way they looked at each other, and a knot formed in his chest. He had trusted them with his life, but now he realized he might have to face something more dangerous than the enemy outside. He might have to choose between them. Neither warrior spoke to the other as they sat in the shadows of the ruined hall. The fire warrior's eyes glowed faintly in the dark, filled with restless fire. The frost warrior's gaze was steady, yet colder than before. Between them sat the human, unaware that his very presence had turned allies into rivals. The war around them was deadly, but the war inside their hearts was only beginning. The ruins of the city gave way to wastelands of ash and broken metal. Their unit had orders to move deeper, to reach an abandoned supply station before the enemy could claim it. The journey was long, filled with ambushes and crumbling roads, but what weighed heaviest was the silence between the fire warrior and the frost warrior. The human walked between them, feeling the tension like a rope pulling tighter with every step. He tried to start small talk, tried to keep their minds on the mission, but their answers were short, their eyes locked only on the horizon. He told himself it was just stress from the war, but deep down, he felt the shift. Something had changed since that last battle, and he was standing in the middle of it. When night came, they set camp in the hollow shell of a collapsed tower. The human built the fire, its orange glow flickering against their faces. The fire warrior sat close to the flames, her hair shining like sparks in the dark. She looked at him often, her eyes softening in ways no one else ever saw. The frost warrior sat on the other side, silent and calm, her silver gaze reflecting the firelight like ice. She too kept her eyes on him, though she hid it well. The human finally felt the weight of their stares. For weeks, he had brushed it aside, telling himself it was nothing. But now, under the broken sky, he could no longer ignore it. He cleared his throat and said, "We need to stay sharp. Tomorrow will be harder. Rest while you can." His words were meant to end the silence, but instead they deepened it. The fire warrior leaned forward suddenly. "Why do you always speak? Like we're fragile?" she asked. Her tone was sharp, but her eyes burned with something else. "You treat us like soldiers, like allies. Do you not see us for what we are?" The frost warrior's voice followed, calm but piercing. "He sees us, that's the problem. He does not know which truth he should face." The human frowned, confused. "What truth?" he asked. Neither of them answered. They only looked at him, and in that silence he finally began to understand. The way they stood close, the way they argued not about war but about him. It was not loyalty, it was not rivalry for power, it was something far deeper. The realization unsettled him. He had seen entire worlds fall apart, but he had never imagined becoming the center of such a storm. He respected them both, trusted them with his life, but now he saw the fire in their eyes was not just about survival. The next day, their mission tested them further. They moved through narrow streets where shadows hid enemy scouts. At one point, they had to split up to flank an outpost. The Fire Warrior volunteered to lead the charge while the Frost Warrior chose to cover from above. The human moved between them, trying to balance their strengths, but every command he gave seemed to fuel their silent competition. When the fighting began, their rivalry was clear. The Fire Warrior charged with blazing speed, her strikes wild and powerful. She wanted to show the human that her fire could burn down anything that threatened him. The Frost Warrior moved with cold precision, each shot perfect, never missing. She wanted to prove she was the shield he needed, the one who would never falter. By the time the outpost fell, the ground was littered with smoke and wreckage. The human stood among the ruins, catching his breath, his heart heavy. He had seen bravery before, but this was different. They were not fighting only for victory. They were fighting for him. That night, as the stars shone through the broken sky, he sat alone for a long time, staring upward. He thought about the fire that burned too hot and the ice that cut too deep. He thought about what it meant to be caught between them. And though he tried to push the thought away, he knew the truth. Someday, he would have to choose. The war had dragged them into darker places. The ruined cities gave way to wastelands where nothing lived but smoke and shadows. Their unit was sent on one of the most dangerous missions yet, recovering a hidden cache of supplies buried deep inside enemy territory. Without those supplies, hundreds of soldiers would starve. Failure was not an option. The human led the way, scanning the broken landscape with sharp eyes. He carried no rank of command, yet every soldier looked to him for guidance. The Fire Warrior walked close to his right, her hand always on her weapon, her fiery gaze watching for threats. The Frost Warrior stayed at his left, her movements calm and measured, her cold presence a wall of protection. The soldiers behind them whispered that he was blessed, guarded by two of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. But he did not feel blessed. He felt trapped. Every step he took was followed by two sets of eyes, one burning with passion, the other steady with ice. They were no longer only rivals in war, they were rivals for something he had never expected. And though he tried to focus on the mission, he could not silence the weight pressing on his chest. When the enemy struck, it was sudden. Blasts of energy tore through the wasteland, scattering the unit. The human dove for cover, shouting for his comrades to hold formation. The Fire Warrior roared into battle, her blade glowing hot as she cut through the first wave. The Frost Warrior stayed behind him, her shots sharp and perfect, striking enemies before they could draw near. But then a heavy blast hit close, knocking the human off his feet. His vision blurred as dust and smoke filled the air. For a moment he thought it was the end. Yet before the enemy could strike again, both warriors moved. The Fire Warrior leapt forward, throwing herself into the storm of fire. She screamed his name as she tore through enemy lines, her body glowing with raw fury. She would burn herself to ash if it meant keeping him alive. The Frost Warrior dropped beside him, pulling him behind cover, her cold hands steady even as blasts shook the ground. She shielded him with her body, her voice calm but sharp. "Stay down. I won't let them take you." In that moment, the human realized the truth. They were not just protecting him as a soldier, they were fighting for him as something more. The Fire Warrior's reckless fury, the Frost Warrior's unshakable calm, both were born from the same place, from something far more dangerous than loyalty. The battle raged on, but their rivalry burned brighter than the enemy's weapons. The Fire Warrior fought as if daring the Frost Warrior to match her sacrifice. The Frost Warrior defended him as if daring the Fire Warrior to control her rage. Their movements no longer fit perfectly as they once had. Their unity had fractured. When the fighting ended, the human lay on the ground, his chest heaving, his armor scorched. He had survived, but not without seeing the truth in their eyes. The fire warrior stood over him, her body trembling from wounds, her fiery hair wild and untamed. She looked at him not with the eyes of a soldier, but with something far more dangerous: need. The frost warrior knelt beside him, her cold hand brushing the dust from his face. Her gaze was calm, but the softness in it was something she could no longer hide. The human pushed himself up, his heart pounding. "You're going to get yourselves killed," he said, his voice low but heavy with anger. "This war isn't about me. Stop fighting each other or we'll all fall." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The war outside was brutal, but the war inside their hearts was worse, and no matter how much he wanted to deny it, he was already at the center of it. That night, as they rested in silence, the human stared at the stars and wondered how much longer he could carry this weight. He had never asked for their hearts, but they had given them anyway, and soon he feared it would destroy them all. The mission for supplies had left the unit shaken. They survived, but the human knew it had come at a cost far greater than wounds. The fire warrior's rage and the frost warrior's calm no longer balanced each other. They clashed like storms. Their bond as comrades was breaking, and every soldier around them could feel it. The march to the next stronghold was quiet. The human walked ahead, his face set in grim focus, but inside his mind burned with questions. He had seen the way they fought, not for victory but for him. He had seen the way their eyes followed him even when enemies were near. And now he knew, if the war didn't kill them, this rivalry might. When they reached the stronghold, the commander sent them on a crucial mission. A massive enemy transport was moving supplies through a canyon. If it reached their lines, thousands would die. Their unit had to strike quickly, with no chance for mistakes. As night fell, they crept into position along the canyon ridges. Fury, human, crouched low, his weapon ready, his breath steady despite the pounding in his chest. To his right, the fire warrior's eyes glowed faintly in the dark, burning with fierce determination. To his left, the frost warrior was silent, her calm presence like a blade of ice in the night. When the convoy appeared, engines roaring through the canyon, the attack began. Explosions lit the night as they struck from above, catching the enemy by surprise. The human fought hard, his rifle steady, his body moving with the instinct of countless battles. But even as he fired, he kept glancing at the two warriors. He could feel the storm between them, stronger than the blasts shaking the ground. It happened when enemy reinforcements poured in from the cliffs. The human was forced down, pinned by fire. He shouted orders, but before he could move, both warriors rushed to him at the same time. The fire warrior leapt with reckless fury, her strikes wild and blazing. She cut down enemies with speed, her movements shouting one message: "He is mine to protect." The frost warrior moved with precise control, cutting through attackers with cold efficiency. Her calm voice barked commands. Her body shielded his without hesitation, but instead of working together, they collided. The fire warrior's fury pushed enemies toward the human's flank. The frost warrior's strict defense trapped him in one place. Their styles, once perfect, now tangled in chaos. The enemy saw the weakness and pressed harder. The human shouted, above the gunfire, his voice raw with anger, "Stop fighting each other." But they did not stop. The fire warrior snarled, her eyes flashing as she cut through another soldier. "If she would stay out of my way, I would end this faster." The frost warrior's reply was ice. "Your recklessness will get him killed. He needs control, not fire." For the first time, the human saw them turn their fury not on the enemy, but on each other. And in that moment, he felt more fear than in any battle before. Because he realized the truth. This was no longer about survival. This was about him, and neither of them would back down. The fight ended with the convoy destroyed, the canyon littered with wreckage. Their unit cheered the victory, but the human did not join. He stood between the two warriors, his chest heaving, his face pale with anger and confusion. "You're tearing us apart," he said quietly. His voice carried more weight than a shout. "I can't fight this war if I'm fighting the two of you as well." The fire warrior's lips parted, her fiery eyes softening, but no words came. The Frost Warrior lowered her weapon, her calm mask cracking for the first time. Neither of them spoke, and the silence between them was heavier than the smoke rising from the battlefield. That night, as the unit rested, the human sat alone on a ridge, staring at the stars. He knew the war outside was far from over, but the Iower war inside their hearts had just crossed a line that could not be undone. The Canyon mission had been a victory, but no one in their unit celebrated for long. They all felt the crack in their unity, and the human carried that weight heavier than his rifle. The Fire Warrior and the Frost Warrior no longer even tried to hide their rivalry. Every glance between them was sharp, every silence filled with unspoken words. The human could not take it anymore. That night, as their unit set camp in the hollow of a shattered ridge, he stood up and faced them. Soldiers nearby watched quietly, sensing something was about to break. "You're both going to listen," he said firmly. His voice cut through the night stronger than he had intended. "This war isn't about me. Stop making it about me. If you keep this up, you'll destroy everything we've fought for." The Fire Warrior's eyes flared with emotion. She rose. To her feet, her fists clenched. "You don't understand. I've seen you stand against death with nothing but your will. I've seen you laugh at pain that would break others. You think this is about pride? No. It's about what I feel, and I won't bury it." The Frost Warrior stood as well, her calm mask still in place, but her voice carried a quiet force. "And I won't bury what I feel either. You changed me. You made me see more than duty. You gave me something I didn't know I could have." Her words were steady, but her silver eyes gleamed with warmth that betrayed her control. The human shook, his head frustration mixing with fear. "Do you hear yourselves? We're in the middle of a war. People are dying every day. I can't be the reason the two of you turn on each other." The Fire Warrior stepped closer, her fiery presence pressing like heat against his chest. Then, "Choose," she whispered, her voice low but burning. "Choose now, and end this war between us." The Frost Warrior's voice followed, calm but sharp. "If you don't choose, it will only grow worse." For a moment he stood frozen between them, his heart pounding. He wanted to deny it, to tell them both that this was madness, but the truth was written in their eyes. They were no longer fighting, only for survival. They were fighting for him. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, his voice raw. "I can't. Not now. Not while this war is tearing worlds apart." His refusal left the air heavy with silence. The Fire Warrior's face twisted with frustration, her body trembling with passion she could not release. The Frost Warrior's gaze lowered, her calm mask slipping for a brief second to reveal the pain beneath. That night, the camp was divided. The human sat apart, staring into the dark sky, his mind a storm of confusion. He had not asked for their hearts, yet now he carried them both. The Fire Warrior sat near the flames, her eyes glowing, her thoughts burning with longing. The Frost Warrior stayed in the shadows, her silver gaze fixed on him, her silence hiding feelings she could not put into words. The soldiers whispered among themselves, knowing what the human already feared. This was no longer just about winning battles. This was about three hearts caught in a storm none of them could escape. As dawn broke, the unit prepared to move again. The human strapped on his armor, his face set in grim determination. He knew the galaxy's war was far from ending. But now he realized the greatest battle might not be fought on the battlefield at all. It might be fought in the quiet moments between him, the fire, and the frost. And one day soon a choice would have to be made. The war dragged them into deeper enemy lines. Their unit had been ordered to escort refugees across the wastelands, through broken cities and shattered fields. It was one of the most dangerous missions yet, slow, exposed, and vulnerable to ambush. The human walked at the front, his jaw tight, carrying not just the weight of war but the weight of two hearts pulling in opposite directions. The Fire Warrior stayed close on his right, her fiery hair whipping in the wind, her hand never far from her blade. Every step she took was filled with restless energy, as if daring any threat to strike. The Frost Warrior kept to his left, her gaze sharp, her movements calm, her rifle steady. The refugees whispered that they felt safe, because of them, as if the human carried two living shields of fire and ice. But the danger came sooner than expected. The enemy struck from the shadows, dropping from ruined towers with weapons blazing. Screams filled the air as the refugees scattered. The human shouted commands, his voice cutting through chaos, pulling soldiers back into line. He ran into the fight without hesitation, drawing fire away from the civilians. Then it happened. An explosion ripped through the street, throwing him across the ground. His body slammed against broken stone, his armor shattered, his breath knocked out. For a terrifying moment he lay still. The fire warrior's scream split the battlefield. She charged like a storm, her blade burning through enemy lines, her eyes wild with fury. Every strike was reckless, her body bleeding from wounds, but she did not care. Her only thought was reaching him. "You will not take him," she roared, her voice echoing with fire and rage. The Frost warrior did not scream. She moved like death itself, her shots cold and precise, cutting down enemies with terrifying calm. Her face was pale, her silver eyes locked on his fallen form. She crouched beside him, pulling him into her arms, shielding him from incoming fire. Her voice was a whisper, steady but filled with cracks. "Stay with me, don't you dare leave." The human opened his eyes slowly, his vision blurred. He saw her face above him, calm but trembling, and behind her, the fire warrior cutting a path through enemies like a blazing flame. For the first time, he realized how far they would go for him. Not just to win, not just to survive, but to keep him alive at any cost. The battle raged on around them. The fire warrior reached his side, her body trembling with exhaustion, blood streaking down her arm. She dropped to her knees, glaring at the Frost warrior as if daring her to let go. "Move. He needs me," she growled. The Frost warrior's grip tightened, her eyes hard as ice. "No. He stays with me. You've done enough with your recklessness," the human groaned, pushing weakly against them, his voice rough. "Stop. Both of you, this isn't the time." But they didn't stop. Even as enemy fire tore through the streets, their standoff grew sharper. The fire warrior's passion burned. Too hot, the Frost warrior's calm cut too deep, and the human lay between them, torn not just by wounds but by the weight of their devotion. In the end, their unit forced the enemy back, the refugees safe. But victory tasted bitter. The human was carried into shelter, his body bruised, his armor shattered. The fire warrior stayed by his right, her hand clutching his as if she would never let go. The Frost warrior stayed by his left, her cold hand brushing his hair from his face, silent but unyielding. The soldiers whispered in awe, saying he was more than a man. They said he was the heart of fire and ice, the one who held them both. But the human felt no awe, only fear, because he knew what was coming. The war outside was nearing its peak, and soon the storm inside would demand an answer. The human's injuries from the ambush healed slowly. He carried new scars not only on his body but deep in his heart. The memory of both warriors fighting over him while enemy fire rained down haunted him. He could no longer ignore what had grown between them. The battlefield was dangerous enough. This triangle of fire and ice was becoming just as deadly. Days later, their unit found brief shelter in a ruined fortress at the edge of the wastelands. The soldiers rested, but the human did not. He sat apart, his eyes locked on the cracked stone walls, his thoughts heavy. He had faced death more times than he could count, yet nothing weighed on him like the decision waiting inside his chest. Fire warrior entered first. Her armor was scorched, her fiery hair loose around her shoulders, her presence filling the room like heat. She looked at him, her voice rough with emotion. "You nearly died, and all because I wasn't fast enough. That will never happen again. I'll burn the galaxy itself before I let anyone take you." Her words trembled with raw passion, her eyes glowing with a mix of fury and longing. The Frost warrior followed. She moved with calm grace, her armor still marked with frost from the cold generators she carried. She stopped just inside the room, her silver gaze steady. You can't promise to stop death with fire, but I can promise I'll always stand between you and it. You changed me, and I will not let you go." Her voice was quiet, but the depth of her conviction filled the air. The human stood, his fists clenched. "Enough," he said, his voice echoing against the stone. "You both saved me, again and again, but you're tearing me apart in the process." The fire warrior stepped closer, her fiery eyes locked on him. "Then end it. Choose me. You know you feel it. The fire between us, you saw it on the battlefield. You laughed at death the same way I do. You and I are the same." The Frost Warrior's reply came like a blade of ice. "No, he is not the same as you. He doesn't need fire. He needs balance. He needs someone who won't let recklessness consume him." Her gaze turned to him, softening. "You need me." The human's heart pounded. Their voices echoed inside him, pulling him in two directions. Fire and ice. Passion and calm. Rage and control. He saw truth in both, and it tore at him. "I never asked for this," he said, his voice breaking. "I came here to fight, not to carry hearts I can't return. You've both given me more than I ever deserved. But I can't choose now. Not like this. Not while the galaxy burns." The fire warrior's eyes narrowed, her body trembling with emotion she could no longer hide. "If you wait too long, you'll lose everything." The Frost warrior's face remained calm, but her hands clenched at her sides. "And if you choose in haste, you'll regret it forever." The silence after their words was heavier than any battle. The human turned away, walking toward the broken window of the fortress. The stars shone beyond, cold and endless, as if mocking the storm inside. His voice came low but steady. "Tomorrow, the war continues. And if we can't fight, together none of us will survive to see the end." Neither warrior answered. The fire burned in one corner of the room, the frost lingered in the other, and the human stood between them, torn in two. The night stretched long, every heartbeat carrying the weight of a choice he still could not make. And though he tried to silence it, he knew the truth. One way or another, the end was near. The galaxy's war reached its final storm. Entire fleets burned in orbit, cities collapsed under fire, and soldiers bled across worlds. For the human and his unit, the last battle came at the gates of the enemy's command stronghold, a fortress of steel and fire that had swallowed countless armies. The human led from the front, his body scarred but unbroken. The fire warrior walked on one side, her eyes blazing, her heart burning for him. The frost warrior walked on the other, her gaze calm but filled with unshaken devotion. Soldiers behind them whispered that they were unstoppable, that the Death Worlder and his two shadows of fire and ice were legends already. The battle began with thunder. Explosions shook the ground, enemy fire lit the skies, and screams filled the air. The human fought like a man possessed, his every strike driven by the will to end this war once and for all. But no matter how fierce he fought, the fire warrior and the frost warrior never left his side. They cut down enemies with blades of flame and ice, moving not for victory alone, but for him. Yet fate struck cruelly. A massive blast tore through the lines, throwing the human to the ground. His weapon flew from his hands and smoke choked his lungs. The fire warrior screamed, rushing forward with fury, her blade glowing like a sun. The frost warrior dropped to her knees beside him, her cold hands lifting his face, whispering for him to breathe. The enemy surged closer, their weapons ready to finish him. And in that moment, the two warriors clashed. The fire warrior's rage burned too hot, her strikes, wild and reckless, pushing the frost warrior aside. The frost warrior fought with icy precision, pulling him back, shielding him from danger even as she shouted at her rival. The human forced himself up, blood on his lips, his voice raw with fury. "Stop!" His shout shook both of them. His eyes blazed as he stood between fire and ice, his body trembling but unyielding. "This ends here. Not the war outside. This war between us." The fire warrior froze, her blade dripping with sparks. The frost warrior lowered her weapon, her silver eyes locked on him. Soldiers around them paused, watching, sensing something greater than battle unfolding. "You think I can choose between you like this?" the human said, his chest heaving. "I can't. I won't. Not when the galaxy is burning. Not when every soldier here needs us united. If you love me, if you truly do, then stand with me. Fight with me, not against each other." For the first time, silence fell on the battlefield. The fire warrior's face twisted, passion burning, but slowly her blade lowered. The frost warrior's gaze softened, her mask of calm breaking into something fragile and real. They looked, at him, at each other, and in that moment, both understood. They could not have him through rivalry. They could only have him through survival. With a roar, the fire warrior turned back to the enemy, her fury unleashed not at her rival but at those who threatened him. The frost warrior stood beside her, cold and steady, her precision deadly. And between them the human fought with renewed strength, his voice leading soldiers into the storm. The battle raged until the fortress fell, flames lighting the sky, the war ending with one final cry of victory. When silence came at last, the human stood at the heart of the ruins, his body battered, his spirit unbroken. On his right stood fire, fierce and alive. On his left stood frost, steady and strong. They had not asked him to choose that day. They had only chosen to fight beside him, for him, and with him. The galaxy whispered of the Death Worlder who ended the war, the man who stood with fire and ice at his side. Some said he would choose one in time. Others said he would never choose, because fire and frost together were what made him whole. For the human, the truth was simple. In the end, the war was not won by fire or frost alone. It was won because they stood together, and for the first time since the galaxy had called his kind Death Worlders, he felt hope, for peace, for survival, and for a future none of them had imagined.